Hello and welcome to another Children's Moments here at Heavenward Thinking. Today our object lesson, and our lesson is going to be, what kind of mitten are you? So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Ruth and we'll get right into our object lesson and lesson today.
So Timothy, I thought today we would combine two of my favorite things, teaching God's Word and children's literature. I absolutely love reading as a first grade teacher, and I enjoyed today reading two different versions of the Mitten. And you remember the story of the Mitten. Timothy, what happened in the story of the Mitten?
All the animals are trying to get into the same mitten together.
They're trying to get in the same mitten together. Now, there are two different versions I read today. One is by Alvin Trusselt, and these mittens are very similar to the mitten in that story. And as you can see, these mittens are sewn pretty tight, pretty close to you, right? And the other one by Jan Brett had mittens that were more stretchy mittens, okay? So as the animals got into the mitten that couldn't be stretched much, stick your hand in there, Timothy. Can you stretch that too much, or does it need to fit
barely
just
can get
tight,
it on, yeah.
right? As the animals kept crowding in there and had more and more animals, the mitten didn't stretch. What do you think happened to that mitten in that story?
Fell apart.
It fell apart. It burst all over, right? But in the story that Jan Brett wrote, as the mitten had more and more animals going in, what happened to that mitten?
It's stretched. It's able to stretch.
It was able to stretch like this glove or like this knitted scarf here. Your grandma used to make you mittens like this, and they stretched, right? Even if your hands grew a little, they would stretch. Well, I was thinking about that on the way home after reading those stories today, and our lives can kind of be like those two mittens. Sometimes when God asks us to keep doing some challenging things and we keep getting filled up, sometimes we don't handle them right and we burst like that mitten, right? Troubles come, hard things come. We are at our limit with our patience and we just burst. We need to be more like the stretchy mitten and be able to let God stretch us out. Remember when he healed the man with a withered hand, what did he ask him to do?
Stretch out your hands.
Stretch, right? Sometimes God stretches us. Well, I wanted to read some verses that kind of can help us think about God stretching us. Sometimes he's going to ask us to do things that are normal, and we need to be willing to stretch, not burst at the seams like the other mitten. So this verse comes from Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8 and 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declared the Lord. So sometimes God's going to stretch our thinking that maybe things aren't the way we think they should be because his ways are higher. So are we willing to be stretched? Are we just going to be, no way, I'm not doing it, and burst at the seams? Then we can look at a couple other verses in Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, which I know you have memorized. What is that verse?
I can do all things through him that gives me strength.
So if we can do all things, can we continue to be stretched?
Absolutely.
Even if it's hard?
Yeah.
Even if
All things.
not everybody's doing those things and Jesus is calling us to do them, can we be stretched? Yes. And then in Hebrews, a great verse of faith. And it says in verse 6, and without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. We can't be stretched unless we have what?
Faith.
We have faith. Are we willing, like that man with the withered hand in the book of Mark, to stretch it? Or are we just going to be filled so much that we can't handle anymore and we burst? So what do you think about that mitten story, Timothy?
We need to have that faith and be flexible, be able to be stretched, and trust in God as he continues to provide ways, even when life is difficult, even when we're filled too full with the trials of life, as you pointed out. So I hope you've been encouraged by this, challenged by this, and that you will consider these two different mittens, and you'll try to be like the stretchable, the flexible one, not this one that burst. Join us next time for another episode of Children's Moments here at Heavenward Thinking.